And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain Podcast. I am your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. And joining me, as always, is Shayne Kubas, contributor for Still Curtain. We have Pittsburgh Steelers football this week. Week 1 of the NFL kicks off here tomorrow with the Chiefs and Lions. And then we get to have the Steelers and the 49ers this Sunday, Shayne. I'm so pumped for that. So let's talk about this week 1 slate of games here. Today, we're going to talk about Steelers versus 49ers preview. We're going to talk about odds, and Shayne and I will give our predictions. Big stuff going on with Nick Bosa right now. We're going to get to that as well. And Shayne and I are also going to give our bold predictions for the upcoming season here, so stick with us for that. But let's talk about this slate here. Shayne, other than the Steelers, 49ers, which obviously we're going to be glued to every second, which game are you excited to watch this week?
I mean, it's hard not to point to the Jets-Bills game. It's just between the drama that's been with the team and everything that's happened with them. The news of Aaron Rodgers obviously coming over has been huge all summer, and that has been talked about to death at this point. But still, it's something that we're going to want to see play out. We're going to see how good can this team really be. And I think that, and when we talked about it pre-show, I don't think Aaron Rodgers has to be spectacular by any means, but he just has to be a starting caliber quarterback for them. Which, even though he had a rough year last year, he was still way more than just a starting, caliber quarterback. So as long as he can maintain at least a decent level of play with the weapons he has around him now with Wilson and the guys he brought over from Green Bay, I think they're going to be really good. But how well do they match up against the Bills in week 1 is going to be really telling to know, are they just a playoff contender or are they a division contender? Because that's a huge difference in that division, especially with what the Dolphins have done and, of course, what the Bills continue to be.
Yeah, and we have to assume that they're going to take a step forward, right? You can't.
You have to.
Going from Zach Wilson and Mike White and Joe Flacco to Aaron Rodgers. So I am interested to see. It does throw like a monkey wrench in this whole thing because the AFC is just stacked right now.
It's stacked. Yeah, there's 10 legitimate playoff caliber.
Yeah, like if the Steelers, Ravens, Chargers, and Jets don't make the playoffs, one of those teams automatically is not getting a wild card spot because there are only 3, obviously. So. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of step they take this year with Rodgers at the helm. And like you said, they don't have to be perfect. He just has to manage the game and allow them to play good defense. I'm looking forward to just the Chiefs-Lions game. I mean, I know there's nothing really on the line. It's not a divisional game. It's conference versus conference here. But I just want football to be back, and I'm so excited for that first game. And we might get a shootout one too, Shayne, because that one, those two teams are projected to score, I think, 51.5 points is the over-under right now. They combined to score like 55 points a game last year, 2 of the top 6 offenses in the league. So that should be a fun one. All right. I had an Ike Taylor interview yesterday, Shayne. If you guys pop it in here, if you didn't check that out yet, go to our channel. If you're on YouTube right now after this, go check out that interview. It's about 33 minutes long. So had a nice little sit down with Ike. We talked about his past career with the Steelers. He spoke praises of Troy Polamalu, talked about his relationship with Joey Porter Jr., and gave us some insight on some of the things that he thinks are going on this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you get a chance, check that out. Shayne, did you get a chance to watch it?
I did, yeah. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to be with the interview, but I did get a chance to watch everything break down. And you could just tell that he is just his own person, right? And I think that's really what made him so fun to watch on the field too. Is he's very unique, right? And you talked about trying to compare him to Joey, and he kind of pushed back on that, which understandably he doesn't like to compare himself to other players or and he was. I mean, he played for so long as an NFL corner. It's hard to really compare most guys to him. But and I think a lot of it too is just Steeler to Steeler, the lack of ball production. You talked to him about that too. He kind of said his team would just
get to rat on him a little bit
about that. But he did mention too, like when the game was on the line or when he really needed to catch a pass, it felt like he did. So he's one of those guys, and hopefully Joey can be that too. And kind of reflect on that as well, even if he's not, the intercepting type of guy ultimately in his career. But fun interview for sure. Definitely check it out, guys. It's one of the ones that Ike's just always a fun guy to talk to. Feels like every interview I see him do, he's always having a good time with it, and he has a lot to say. So.
Yeah, that was one of the longer ones as well. So a lot of content in there to unpack. Also, there's an article up on the site just the highlights of that if you just want to catch that as well. But make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Shayne and I are going to try to bring you an extra show each week moving forward. So that's in the works as well. All right, Shayne, before we get to our Steelers versus 49ers preview for this week. There's a lot of things to talk about in that game alone, but I want to give our bold predictions for this upcoming season. It's what everybody does this time of year. We'll see if any of these come to fruition or not. Obviously, we have certain expectations. We're kind of going a little above and beyond here with some of the things that we have to say. But I guess I can go ahead and start with mine, Shane, because yours are a total mystery to me, and we'll see what you have here. So I'm going to go through. I have 5 bold predictions for the Steelers this year, Shane, and I want your thoughts on each of these. The first one is, I think that Kenny Pickett is going to live up to the year 2 hype. Like everybody's talking about, is Pickett's going to have this awesome breakout year? I think he can do it. And I think that it solidified that for me, Shane, watching him down in Latrobe this year and just seeing just how much he overflows with confidence. He's winging the ball down the field. He is not looking to check the ball down underneath. Like he wants to make that big play all the time. And then you watch that going from Latrobe and then that translating on the field this summer for the preseason in all 3 games. I mean, 5 of 5 scoring touchdowns on his drives. Now, I understand this is coming against a lot of backup players. Not a lot of starters played in the preseason of the 3 games that the Steelers played their opponents this year. Regardless, Shane, the ball placement is good. Whether starters or backups, the ball placement is right where it needs to be. You talk about like the pass to Freiermuth, threading the needle there, and the one to Pickens in the first preseason game. So the touch, the ball placement, the downfield aggressiveness from Pickett, I think he's showing all the signs of that year 2 leap. So I think he's going to make it happen.
Yeah, and I will second that with you. I think the thing with him mostly, and I think this is partly also why, even though we've talked a lot about this, especially once the decision was made to retain Matt Canada, that there's going to be a ceiling that this offense kind of can hit where it's only going to be so high. Like there's a high floor because of the way that they're going to play and running the ball and all this stuff, but the ceiling is limited, right? And I'm hoping that maybe all Matt Canada needed to see was a quarterback who was confident and was not afraid to take these shots down the field. Because when he was coordinating with Ben was at the end of his career, wasn't the same passer. He still was aggressive at times, but he didn't have the arm strength anymore. He didn't have a lot of the stuff that made him special as a downfield thrower anymore. So, I think Matt kind of fed into that with his play calling. Same thing with Kenny's rookie year. He's a rookie, not the strongest arm guy. Let's try to just maintain the game, get ahead of the chains, of the downs, do all that stuff. Now that he's seeing what Kenny's done and that he's gotten much better throwing the ball down the field, especially seems like both in camp and in the preseason, I'm hoping maybe he kind of takes that ceiling off the offense a little bit, right? Like lets him do a little bit more of the high level stuff the quarterbacks across the league do have to do to be able to get to that level that we want Kenny to get to. So I'm hoping that Matt can loosen the reins a little bit, and Kenny can continue to do what he's been doing throughout the summer and in the preseason, attacking down the field more.
Yeah, it's definitely a 2-way street there, and I'm hoping that Canada does lighten up a little bit that way.
Just a little bit. It doesn't have to be a ton, but a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the Steelers were the worst team in the league throwing the ball over the middle of the field. They were the worst team in the league in yards after the catch, and you just can't be there. You can't be there and expect to have a good offense. So that all needs to improve. It's a 2-way street, and we'll see how that works. All right, my next bold prediction, Shane. This one is going to be a little bit controversial, and it already is. I mean, people talk about it all the time, and that's all right. Yeah. I walk that line sometimes. I think that there's going to be a more or less an even split in the backfield by the second half of this season. Like I think that, and again, it's not against Najee. I just think that Jaylen Warren is good. Like all the advanced analytics tell you that he was like a top 10 or 11 back in the NFL last year in terms of efficiency. Now this is a small sample. We're talking like 85 carries or 85 touches here last season. So it's pretty small, but I think that just watching him and everything he's done, he just looks like that complete yet compact running back that can just do a lot of things. And the Steelers are going to want him on the field. And so I think between that and then maybe a lack of like explosive plays from Najee kind of equate to, we're going to have a balance that's a little bit more even this year. It's not going to be, we've got our workhorse and we've got our backup. I think we got our 1A and our 1B. And so I think that by the second half of the year, I think that Warren could be carving out not maybe a 50-50 role, but pretty close to that.
So I do think it's more possible than it's ever been since Najee's been drafted that a running back behind him can take more of the snaps. Because this is a guy that led the league in touches his rookie year, Like he is a workhorse in every sense of the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there is value to that, to being a guy that can just lean on the defense and can put pressure on them in that way. But I do think there's two reasons why I think that an even split is unlikely, but also just a full on like true backfield committee is probably not likely early on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really just the improvement of the offensive line. Like Najee's big play rate is never going to be high. He's not that type of player. But if you can give him lanes and get him up through the middle of the defense and with a head of steam, it's just hard to tackle. like he's gonna get the 5, 6, 7 yard runs more than the 2, 3, 4 he's been getting if they give him that initial lane to get through. Because the biggest problem I've seen with him as a runner throughout his career is the fact that he hasn't been able to trust what he sees in front of him because of some of the issues they've had on the offensive line. His vision also just wasn't elite at Alabama. I will say that is one of his traits that I want to see him get better at. But I'm hoping with more actual lanes that will be visible, his vision will become a little bit less of an issue if that's the case. But the other thing with it is with Warren, I really do believe he's in that class of back that's like he's best used in that true change of pace, give the defense a different look role. I think the more snaps you give him, his efficiency naturally will go down, but also I just think how fresh he's going to be, how explosive he's going to be compared to Najee and the defense he's going up against is going to start. That gap's going to start to get start to shrink. I mean, and I like the balance they had last year, but I do want to see Warren get more touches. So it's a tough conversation for me. Like I understand why people have brought this up because Najee hasn't been very efficient, but I do think his efficiency is going to naturally go up this year. And Warren's you just can stay the same and maybe just a little bit more, if not a pretty decent amount more of touches. So.
Yeah, and look, folks, there's nothing wrong with keeping your running backs fresh either,
exactly.
right? You want these guys
I don't want him to have
healthy and fresh.
It's not really good
exactly. And so I think there's benefit, and I think there's a case to be made for that. But at the same time, it's like Najee was that first round pick, and it stings a little bit for some people if you bring this up in any way. So I want what's most efficient for the Steelers. I want what's going to be best for them when you get to December, January, because that's where it's going to matter most that you have these guys healthy and strong. All right. We've got some guys dropping in the chat here. Jeremiah, I see. If you have any questions for us, please drop those in and we would love to be able to discuss them. I know that we're all getting hyped about this upcoming season and this matchup coming up against the 49ers, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. All right. 3 more predictions for me, Shayne. I think that George Pickens is going to have the 1,010 stat line. By that, I mean the 1,000-yard, 10 touchdown season. That's a pretty big leap from what he had last year, but it's very doable. And if you want some free money, I'll tell you right now, go to DraftKings and you bet George Pickens over 4.5 touchdowns and you bet him over 750 yards. I mean, even if this guy lands on IR eligible to return, there's a chance that he does this anyway. If he plays a full 17-game season, he's getting both of these. There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, he would have to regress from what he did as a rookie on a mere 81 targets or 84 targets to now, and I just don't see that happening. So that seems like free money. Obviously, there's always injury risk. Pickens did have an ACL tear junior year in college, and so if that's something like that happens, obviously he's not going to get it. So walk the line however you want to here, but I put some money on that. I think that's worth the gamble. Shayne, what do you think? Can he do the 1,010 this year?
I think it's definitely the 1,000 yards. I think is going to be heavily based on volume, right? Like I think that's really what it comes down to because he had a really healthy yards per catch average. He's going to, because of the way he wins, he's going to get a lot of targets that are 20 plus yards down the field. And again, as we found out, it doesn't really matter if he's open or not in those cases, right? Like this is not a player that relies on, like Deontay getting open quickly underneath, getting open down the field with 2 steps of separation or more. You could just throw the ball his way in pretty much any situation and you 70-30 at worst. Honestly, it feels like at this point, it's just not fair. Right. And you talked about like the DraftKings, but that's the Matt Canada handicap is what I call it. When you look at stat lines like that, and you're like, people will bet the under just because, Matt Canada is bad. But yeah, if you're betting and you have a few dollars to throw at something and you want to add it to like a, parlay or whatever, that's a good one to do. Those two are definitely good. The 10 touchdowns, I think, is really going to be about red zone, right? Like, can he be a true red zone beast this year? And I think that obviously all the tools are there to be that type of guy. But the only thing I will say is I really kind of hate the end zone fade play in general in football at this point. Too many teams do it when they're not good at it. Now, he's one guy that you actually probably can throw a lot to and they'll be successful. But it's just going to come down to, can he get open more in the red zone? Can he get like truly open? Because things get tighter. It's harder to get one-on-ones truly where they're good balls to go up and catch. So the 10 touchdowns is the one I'd be a little bit surprised about just because of the way the passing offense is built. But the 1,000 yards should be well within range as long as he gets enough targets.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, it's about the quantity of looks he ends up getting. I mean, if he only gets another 85 to 90 looks next year, it's going to be really, really hard to do that. You have to be incredibly efficient, which he was last year, 9.5 yards per target. It ranked 13th in the NFL among wide receivers. So the efficiency's there, and he's taken a step forward by what it looks like so far, everything I've seen this summer. So give him the ball more and we'll make this happen. And so, and for what it's worth, this is my bold. I went on the high side here. I did give a George Pickens season stat prediction on stillcurtain.com. You can check that out, where I was a little bit more realistic with those numbers there. So go ahead, give that a look. We are going to, next one is TJ Watt. I'm so sorry here.
We have a little friend in the background.
I have TJ Watt getting 20 sacks this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers, the second 20 sack season. I think that it's attainable. He did it on 15 games, got 22 and a half. I think he can do that this year. Shayne, what do you think?
So first, I'm curious what our friend would think about that, but I'll jump in first here. No, I think 20 sacks with TJ, it's pretty much, you can't really say it's a bold prediction at this point, honestly. I think it's more likely just, is he going to play enough games and play enough snaps to do that? Because now they have a little bit more edge depth, on the edge when it comes to Marcus Golden, rookie Nick Herbig. So you hope that he doesn't have to play as many snaps he's had to in the past. But if he plays 17 games, it's going to be hard for him not to get close to that amount just based off that alone. So now that you're back with us, Tommy, basically I was saying that at this point, I don't even know if that's a bold prediction, simply because if he plays all the games, this is what he does. Like, he gets up there in the sack lead. Like, this is kind of what he does. So I'll definitely sit there and say that if he doesn't get 20 sacks, it's going to be close if he plays enough games.
Yeah, and I mean, you're right. If he plays all that time, it probably isn't that bold. I think that the record is even attainable, assuming he's completely healthy this year. And I apologize for anybody watching on YouTube here. I've got a lot of little rascals around here. I got one of my kids just came in here. So 5 kids, 6 on the way. We try to keep them at bay during rest time.
Yeah, I'm sure it's tough. Yeah, I can't relate right now. So
one more prediction here, Shayne. I think the Steelers defense finishes as a top 3 unit this year. And I don't think that it's that big of a stretch, because you can see the improvements they made when Watt came back, when they were finally healthy. The depth is suddenly much better on the team. It seems like you got Keanu Benton and DeMarvin Leal and Nick Herbig and Marcus Golden. And now your depth seems twice as strong as it did last year. So I think that they can sustain an injury or two to some of their starters as long as Watt doesn't get hurt. I mean, that's a big one, obviously. But I think that a top 3 defense is definitely attainable this year.
Yeah, I think the 2 biggest factors there are going to be health and the secondary, right? Because if the secondary, especially corner, holds up well enough, I mean, even last year, like, we got turnovers from that unit, just didn't have a lot of great coverage plays at times. But if the secondary can be a little bit better in coverage this year, and Watt, of course, stays healthy, this team, when he plays, they are a top 5, top 3 defense, right? Like, that's just how it's been for the last several years. Kind of almost regardless what's going on around him, like, he seemingly can kind of just impact the game enough to where everyone else's jobs are so much easier that they can get to that ranking, right? And then obviously having Minka play like he did last year, if he continues that. And I think the other X factor is going to be Cam. Like, we talk about him all the time. Like, he doesn't seem to be slowing down in any way noticeable. He's so freaking strong. It almost doesn't matter if his athleticism starts to wane a little bit, because he's just going to pile drive the offensive guard into the lap of the quarterback anyway. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's as long as the guys that have always been there and been great are also great this year, which there's really no reason to believe they won't be. The rest of this defense has improved in a lot of areas, in my opinion. You have a lot more depth at edge, obviously, than we've had in several years. So even if TJ goes down, we're at least better equipped to handle it. I don't think it's going to, allow us to be a top 3 defense without him or anything, but it's at least going to let us, get a little bit more pass rush going. We'll call Nick Herbig TJ Light for now, have that going on. But yeah, I think again, it is bold just because there's so many great defenses right now, especially at the top. There's a lot of defense. One of them we're about to play, depending on, if their edge rusher plays, we'll talk about that a little bit. But, a lot of great defense in the NFL, but the Steelers have been up there in the past. We've seen it before back in 2019, especially. And, I think it's definitely possible this year.
All right, Shayne, those are my 5 bold predictions. What do you have for us for the Steelers this year?
All right, so my first one kind of goes a little bit against your split backfield thing, but I don't think it necessarily means they won't split touches a decent amount, but I just it's more so a philosophical reason for why I believe this. I think Najee could finish top 5 in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns this year. And a lot of that is going to be an increased efficiency when he does carry the ball. I don't think he's going to lead the league in carries or anything like that, but I do think he's going to be up there still in total touches, especially carrying the football. And I just really trust this interior of the offensive line, especially. If the tackles can hold up and do their job well enough and keep guys from crashing down on the run game, this interior should open up a lot more lanes than they have the last couple of years. And if you give this guy a lane, we know when he does get in the open field, he is a load. It's just the case. He's 240 pounds, and I don't know what he's listed at. He's at least that much. I don't care what anybody says. He is just a load. He is. And he does have the wiggle in the open field when he does get the opportunity to use it. Now, is he ever going to be a threat to score from 70 yards out? No, it's just not what he does. But that's not really what they're asking him to do, not what they're expecting him to do. It's more about staying ahead of the chains, everything like I said before, getting positive plays first and second down, allowing the offense to move smoothly. They're in better position than ever to do that with him. And again, Jalen is going to eat into his touches, especially as the season goes on, if they use him really a lot early, because they don't want to have him wear out by the time the playoffs come around, if we can get in the playoffs, obviously. But the run game did make a comeback last year, but there's not that many teams that are looking to just pound the rock this year, even after last year. Like Titans are still going to probably be doing that if Henry's healthy. Even the Browns are trying to move towards more of a passing element, in their offense. We'll see if that works out for them or not, but they seem, more inclined to do that. Some of the other backs in the league are either getting older or do have committees also themselves. Like, I think that this is definitely possible, especially the touchdowns. Like you get down the red zone. We're not a team that really throws the ball out in the red zone, it feels like, and not effectively. Maybe more so this year, but I think he could get a lot of the goal line work, of course, with Warren kind of being more the in between the 20s type of back. So I think it's totally possible that this could happen.
Yeah, I mean, if Mike Tomlin has his way and he can run the game plan that he wants to, which is we want to pound the rock 40 times a game, we want to play great defense, then by all means, I think it's going to take both volume and a step up in efficiency for Najee to make this happen.
Exactly.
Because I don't think that Warren is going away either. Like, even if Najee
he won't go away. No.
I think there's going to be at least somewhat of a committee work there, just because I think he's going to be efficient in his touches as well. But I think that's attainable if the Steelers are able to execute their game plan.
Yes,
a lot of that's going to come with the guys up front. And so, like I said, a combination of lots of volume and a big step in the right direction in efficiency. We've got a question here as well, Shayne. Let's see. All right. How many sacks given up by Dan Moore before we make the switch to Broderick Jones? This is tough. In my original prediction, kind of from the beginning, Shayne, I've kind of felt like this is the Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett scenario, where it's like, that Pickett's going to be the guy, just like we know that Broderick's going to be the guy. And it all kind of just depends on the performance. So the performance wasn't up to snuff with Trubisky early last year. And it was at week 4 halftime against a strong Jets defense. They were willing to throw Pickett in there. So if they were willing to do that with what they hope to be their future franchise quarterback, I don't see that they would have any issue with throwing Broderick in there in a similar situation. So I've always kind of said, I think week 4 or 5 range for Dan Moore to maybe get out of that spot and put Broderick in. A lot of this is going to depend on his performance. Like, if Moore takes a 3rd-year leap and looks like a different player this year, it might not come until later in the year, and maybe they'll shuffle a few players. So, because Moore, I think the plan eventually is maybe to see if he can be that right tackle for the Steelers. So maybe it won't be Moore. Maybe it'll be Chooks. Like, if Chooks really struggles, maybe they'll say, all right, let's bring Broderick in and we'll kind of shuffle Moore. We had him doing that during the preseason and during the summer. So it is a good question. It's certainly one worth pondering. And so it kind of just depends. Broderick is very, very raw. Only had that 1 full year starting experience at Georgia. So I think they're going to try to be as patient as possible. But obviously, if the tackle play is not meeting their expectations, it's going to be sooner rather than later. Shayne, do you have any different thoughts on that?
Not really. I think another big thing is Moore has to continue to play better, which he has this preseason in general. He's played well enough to fend him off. Let me put it this way. Like, Jones didn't do enough as a pass protector, especially to warrant getting the start over Moore. And I think that going into the regular season, the thing the Steelers would love to see happen is Moore's just really good, and that maybe, like you said, the core four is the guy who ends up getting knocked to the bench at some point. Like, that's the ideal, like, both from a money standpoint and from a future standpoint. Like, Moore playing really well and a core four being the guy that ultimately gets replaced is the best option for this team long term. I also think Jones just has to show it in practice too, because these teams are still gonna, or this team's still gonna practice during the regular season, obviously, and try to challenge Jones as much as they can and let him prove to them that he's ready to play. And I think once they feel comfortable playing him in a starting role, it just comes down to, is it Moore or a core for, like you said, that gets the axe first? I really think that's kind of what it comes down to. It's going to happen at some point, I assume. It's just who's going to be the guy that sits on the bench at that point.
Yeah, and I would have to assume, like, barring another signing or spending another high pick on the offensive line, I think it's really easy to see a path for Moore to be that right tackle next year, and a core for to maybe possibly not be on the team. He's got that. They can save $10 million in cap space. I don't know what the plan is. Maybe they'll give him another extension, and I just have a hard time believing that we can do something like that unless he also takes a step forward. But again, when you're talking about a core for 6 years into his NFL career, I mean, we really need to have seen those jumps already from what we've seen. So more hope for Moore on my part than there is for a core four to be that long-term option there. But it'll be interesting because we know that Broderick's going to get on the field at some point this year. Shayne, what other bold predictions do you have for us?
So this one is a little bit vague, but it's more so just a feeling, especially if this team is either rolling, especially, and they feel like they need to add something, or if they think they're missing something. I think the Steelers can make a truly impactful midseason trade this year, because Khan has shown the willingness to do things that Colbert just never did, right? A lot of the stuff that's happened in the last 2 off seasons is stuff that we're just not used to as Steelers fans, between free agency being a big part of things and, moving up in the draft a little bit, things like all that type of stuff, right? It's stuff that we're just not used to. And I think that one of those things could be, let's assume, we have an injury somewhere, or maybe we don't like the corner room after 6-7 games, we want to add somebody there, or whatever it may be, right? I think that this year, more than maybe ever, the possibility, if we're doing well and it's not going to be for anything super substantial draft pick wise or player wise, Khan could look on the trade market and say, okay, I have a team that's in the AFC, we're in the fight right now, it's going to be a dogfight every year, might as well try to take advantage of it if we're starting off well. I could easily see that being something that he would look to do. And I think there's going to be some teams that are selling this trade deadline that could have some pieces that'd be fun to add to this team. So,
yeah, we've seen the aggressiveness from Khan, right? I mean, that's been really evident. I mean, the Chase Claypool trade kind of kicked things off there. And so far, I mean, the results have been what you've wanted. And so I think that I wouldn't be surprised either. And obviously that's going to depend on how Steelers are at that point. We will look at close to that trade deadline, that November 1st mark right there. If it looks like we're in the thick of things and maybe just one more player to get over this hump, yeah, absolutely. I can see them doing something like that. Do you have any other ones, Shayne?
Yeah, 2 other ones. So this one is more based on a combination of, I expect him to play sooner rather than later, and I think teams are going to target him because he's a rookie. I think Joey Porter Jr. has 3+ interceptions as a rookie. I think that they're gonna throw at this guy whenever he gets on the field, even though he is a guy that's hard to throw at because of his length and everything else. I think that unless the other corners are just dreadful, right? Unless Patrick Peterson's can't cover anybody, Levi Wallace is getting toasted every play, which he's not a great corner, but he was at least decent last year. I don't think he's going to be a huge liability. Unless those guys are just getting picked on constantly themselves and they don't need to throw at Joey, I think teams are going to throw at him because he's a rookie, right? They want to see if he can get it done. And I think because of that, he's going to get his hands on some balls. And I think, unlike Ike, and we talked, like you had in the interview, I do think even in the regular season, I think his hands showed a little bit of improvement, I think, throughout camp, and he did make some plays in camp on the football. I think there's more potential for that type of play from him than we originally thought.
Yeah, I would think so too. And I didn't know how I would feel about that, but then I went down and watched him hitting the jug machines after practices, knowing that he had 3 or 4 picks in team sessions down there. And then he goes and turns around, and some of his first action in the preseason, he gets an interception. So I think that I don't think that we're going to see the same trend. I don't think it's going to be Ike-like in terms of you're playing a 12-year career and you get 14 picks. I think it'll be better than that. And so 3, I think it's attainable. It just depends on how early he gets on the field, and he's going to need that opportunity as well. So if that opportunity comes his way, I think that can happen based on what I've seen. All right, we got a question from Jeremiah here. And let's see. Which did I hit the wrong button here?
No, you said Jeremiah's here. This one right here.
Oh, what did I got? I'll let you handle that.
Got it.
All right, there we go.
This question here from Jeremiah. King Khan, yeah, I like that nickname for Omar Khan. Yeah, what did the two of you think of King Khan man has done in his first season in the Steelers? He's done great. Let me just start off there. I think he's done a great job of kind of reinvigorating this team defensively, especially. Obviously we could talk about the picks of Pickett and everything like that last year, and that was still Colbert involved in that mostly as well, of course. But Khan's first full offseason, he obviously goes and gets a hopefully future franchise tackle. He drafts a bunch of players from a school I like, which means he already gets brownie points from me, and they're also good players. So, win-win. He taxes in free agency, gets Isaac Seumalo, great guard to help with that interior offense. Like everything he's done, but between the aggressiveness, the stuff that's more so just true, like team building aspect of things, trusting in Kenny Pickett and allowing him to grow this year as well, and talking him up as much as he has, talking about the arm strength, just kind of giving him as much confidence as possible. He's really, it feels like, and we'll see once the season gets kicked off, because none of this really matters until the games start getting played, right? But it just feels like he's pushing all the right buttons at every moment. And I'm very excited to see not just this year how things play out, but into the future with him as a GM.
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit already, Jeremiah. Good question. I liked Khan a lot. As soon as he executed that Chase Claypool trade, I did not think you could get that for Claypool.
No,
and we didn't know that was going to be a 32nd pick at the time, but I was good with anybody's second rounder. I was good with a third rounder. And so that's where it really started for me. And then it's like, all right, free agency, you're filling holes. You're doing what my philosophy would be in free agency is you use free agency to fill holes. You use the NFL draft to draft the best players at the most important positions. And after that draft, I had my confidence in Khan was soaring because I think that this is going to be one of the best draft classes that Khan has had in quite some time. Now, obviously, multiple factors here. You got to hit on some of these later round guys, which it looks like they might. And then you had plenty of early picks, so you can't be busting on Joey Porter and Broderick Jones. But assuming that these guys turn out, I mean, I think that I was very high. I think the Steelers they drafted over the value with every single pick, with the exception of their very last pick, which was Spencer Anderson, who made the team and has had a good summer. So
exactly.
So I think that it's going to be a really strong draft. I'm pleased, to say the least, with what Khan has done so far. All right, Shane, you have one more bold prediction?
Yep, one last one. And this one I think you're going to like a lot. And I think that it's, especially considering the Kelsey news about his knee, which hopefully he turns soon. You always want to see Kelsey out there running around. But I think Pat Freiermuth could be inside the top 3 in receiving yards for tight ends this year. I really think it's possible, because you look at just what he was able to do last year, even missing some time. And a key thing for him is going to be health. If he plays 17 games in this offense with Kenny Pickett, the way those two are linking up late in the season last year, I just feel like, again, they want him to be a focal point in the passing game. I think he should be, because, again, he provides an element that no one else on this team provides right now. Attacking over the middle of the field, run after catch ability, like just stuff that the rest of these guys, like Deontay, he should have run after catch ability. We know about him, how he likes to run backwards for some reason. I really feel like they should put a wall behind him constantly when he's running routes and stuff, make sure he doesn't run backwards. But like, he's capable of it, but he doesn't really use it all the time. And we don't give him great opportunities usually. Pickens showed a little bit more of that, and especially that touchdown against the Bucs. But again, he's not really that type of receiver generally either. He's going to be more of the obviously contested catch guy. Pat gives you the ability to throw somebody an 8-yard, pass and get 15 yards, 20 yards out of it. He's just really hard to tackle after the catch. He's elusive for a guy his size. Like, he's very Kelsey-esque in the way that he moves after the catch, right? Like, he's not the same route runner. He's not the same, guy as far as feeling zones and getting open in space, but he just is a load to tackle once he has the ball. So I think he could get a lot of the run after catch in this offense, and you hope that it even gets better than it has been the last couple of years.
Yeah, I almost went that route with one of mine, Shane. I think that you want to talk about a complete player. It's Freiermuth. And no, he might not be like this extraordinary athlete or anything testing wise that way, but he's just so smooth, and he knows, he just knows what to do. And he's just a football player. So led the league led the Steelers in yards after the catch last year, which is, I mean, that's a noteworthy feat when you're a tight end doing that, and you've got talented players elsewhere. So I think that that's definitely attainable. Again, kind of like the Pickens one, it's going to come down to volume. I think that Johnson's targets need to go down and Pickens and Freiermuth need to go up this year. If I was redistributing that for the sake of the team. And so I think that's definitely possible. And he's got to avoid those concussions and stay on the field. And if he can do that, I think that that's well within reason there. All right. Those are all of our bold predictions for the Steelers in the 2023 season. If you are a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support, and subscribing is going to help us bring you more content. Shayne and I are, like I said, we're planning another show each week, and we'd love to have you join that one as well. Yes. All right, Shayne, Steelers versus 49ers. Let's give our preview for week 1 here. Biggest things to watch. Let's kick things off with the odds here, Shayne. Let me pull them up. I got them right here sitting on DraftKings. The Steelers are 2.5-point home underdogs this year, plus 2.5. Money line of minus 205, or excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong money line of plus 120. Over under set at 41 points this week. Is this a fair line? I mean, do you think the Steelers should be? I mean, should it be even odds? The Steelers played their starters during the preseason. They're at home this week. There's questions going on. And now the 49ers didn't. The 49ers rarely played their starters during the preseason. And they got this whole fiasco going on with Nick Bosa that we're going to talk about. So should this be closer? And how would you bet this?
So I think the problem with it is the Niners are very much heavy favorites to be one of the top 2 teams in the NFC, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of benefit of the doubt given to the fact that Brock Purdy is healthy and that he's going to work well within Shanahan's scheme, and the defense, even without Bosa, is still pretty strong in general. Like, I think there's a lot of benefit of the doubt being given to the Niners, right? I will say, all you have to do as far as whether you think this line is fair is go ask the Bills and the Bengals the past 2 years whether or not they want to play the Steelers in week 1. The answer to that is no. Yes. This team hasn't lost a game in week 1 since I believe the 2019 season. And that was actually, I think they may have tied that year with the Browns. Like, I don't remember if it was a tie or a loss, but they win on week 1 pretty often. And the last 2 years, they've beaten teams that they had no business realistically beating in week 1. And you get them at home with a quarterback who, I'm sorry, Kyle Shanahan is really good. I don't think Brock Purdy's that good. I think he's just an extension of Shanahan's scheme, which is all he needs to be. I'm not even saying that it's going to affect their season that much. But, like, against this pass rush with an offensive line that outside of Trent Williams is just not good. They do not have a solid offensive line starter, in my opinion, outside of Trent Williams. And Trent Williams obviously changes numbers in the run game more so than any tackle, maybe in NFL history. That's something that, if you want to, I can talk about Trent Williams a lot. But the point being is that if they can block TJ, if they can hold him up, then they'll be mostly okay. But then you also have to deal with Highsmith. You also have to deal with the other edge rushers. You have to deal with Cam Hayward. Like, there's not an interior offensive lineman on this team that can handle Cam Hayward, even with some help, in my opinion. Like, they really have to be able to execute that Shanahan-style offense perfectly. And now, again, this is the guy doing it, and it's with the quarterback that he chose over his 3rd overall pick. That there's a lot of talk about that we could talk about too. I just think that overall, this is not as good of a matchup as the odds probably make it look. That's just all I'll say about that as far as the odds go.
Yeah, I think that the 49ers, what they did in 2022 and how they finished the season so strong. I think they won like 10 straight games.
Purdy won every game he started. Except
and then you get eliminated to the Eagles, and you were decimated at quarterback in that game as well. And so I'm sure they're giving them some leeway here, and that's why. And obviously, they go where they think the bettors are going to go. So having them have 49ers at minus 2.5. I think it's probably fair for where the odds are set, at least. Having said that, we'll get to our predictions just a little bit later here. But let's move on for a bit, Shayne. Let's talk about Nick Bosa. I mean, this is the biggest storyline in the NFL right now because we are just days away from the NFL season, and the reigning defensive player of the year is looking doubtful for this week. Latest report from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network says that he is still not in there with the facility. He has still not showed up. And we're recording this as of Wednesday, so we just got a couple of days until the game. Obviously, Bosa is in the thick of a contract dispute. He wants to reset the market for pass rushers. And you can see why. I mean, the guy has had 34 sacks over the last 2 seasons, 8.5 last year. They were the number 1 scoring defense in the league, allowed just over 17 points a game, which is amazing. and their schedule wasn't that hard, but that's besides the point. Bosa is going to get paid, and he's going to be he's going to leapfrog TJ Watt at the position. But boy, this one could cost him. Like if the Steelers end up winning a close game because Nick Bosa doesn't play and he's not there to disrupt on both sides of the football or both tackles, that could cost them a win, and it could be great for the Steelers. Now, and in a perfect situation, Shayne, I'd love for the Steelers to be able to win with Bosa playing.
Yes.
And I'd love for TJ Watt to one up Nick Bosa in this game, just to say, yeah, I still got you, young guy. So, but at the same time, it's like, all right, a win is a win. Like so many fluky things happen in week 1 anyway. The Steelers just have to come away with a win at home this week. How do you think this is going to play out ultimately?
So I think him and Chris Jones, because they're both kind of doing the same thing right now for Chris Jones for the Chiefs. They're kind of saying, you know what? It's early in the season. Let's see how much you really need me. You don't want to pay me what I want. Let's see how much you can do without me. Now, I think the Chiefs are in a unique position where they probably can get away with it a little bit more just because of who their quarterback is. But at the same time, they definitely need him. And I think Bosa is obviously just so important for this defense because outside of him, their edge rush is just not anything to write home about. I mean, they have guys, Drake Jackson they drafted in the second round who you hope can kind of be that other starter at some point soon. They bring in Javon Hargrave, who we'll talk about a little bit later. But overall, their defense is still going to be pretty good without him, but they're not going to be the level they were last year without him on the field. And I think he's probably thinking, okay, you know what, if I miss the first game or two and we lose, that's not going to torpedo our season, but it's also going to remind them how important I am. And I think that's kind of what this is heading towards, right? Like they could still, it could come out probably, if it does, it's 5 minutes after we stop recording or stop being live that, they got a deal done. He's going to play, whatever. But the other problem with the Niners right now is they have so much money tied up going into next year specifically, multiple $20 million cap hits. They have Brock Purdy's not on, he's on his rookie contract, which normally helps, but this team is already so developed and has so many players that they're paying that it doesn't really even help. Like they're going to have to do a ton of restructuring. They're going to have to save a lot of money other places next year. And adding a $30+ million contract to that, even if they do, backload it or do whatever you have to do, money's going to start getting tight. They don't want to become the Saints who basically have to just hemorrhage their cap space and their cap situation every year. They don't want to be that team. So it's starting to, you're starting to wonder if it is worth it to maybe consider if a team's willing to give you enough of a haul, or maybe you can get a really good edge player from another team back for him plus other things. Is it worth looking on the market and seeing what teams are willing to offer just because of the money factor more than anything?
That's a question that I feel like it is warranted, and people will hate it because it's like,
it's not against Nick Bosa as a player. Like, so, I think he's worth what he wants. It's just, if you're the Niners, like much of your money is tied up in the defense right now.
And for what it's worth, Shayne, the 49ers are in the hole already for next year's cap space. So they've got a lot of finagling to do here, and you could make it work. I mean, extensions,
you can do it.
Structures. And obviously they would love to be able to keep Bosa. It's just, what is he asking for? Like, what is he asking for that's so far off that they can't make this work all the way up until this point? But I guess, it's not that different than what we saw from TJ Watt in 2021, just before his DPOY season. And he came in there just before the game and said, look, give me the paperwork. I'm signing the contract. I'm playing. So for 49ers fans, I'm sure they would love for Nick Bosa to be able to do the same thing and say, look, come in. Let's sign it. Let's get this thing done. Let's move on and focus on football. It doesn't look like that's the case based on the latest report, Shayne, and the Steelers could luck out here. The 49ers could be without their best player this week, and that could be big. And like you said, they don't have a lot of depth there at the position. The Steelers offensive line should be able to keep them in check. Now that the 49ers still have talent everywhere. They've got great safeties and linebackers, and you got the Hargrave matchup this week as well. We'll talk about here in a second. But not having Nick Bosa, we saw what the Steelers were like without TJ Watt. Going from like an MVP level player down to the next guy, no matter who that is, it's always going to be a significant drop, and it will greatly impact the game. So the other one here I want to talk about here is George Kittle as well, Shayne. Guy that's kind of been on the fence a little bit this year or leading up to this game, because man, Kittle, as good as he is, this guy is always banged up, and it's horrible for his career. But what would this mean for the Steelers if Kittle didn't show up to play in this one?
Well, it really helps out the linebackers because he's a tough matchup, and that's who would be getting it a lot of the time, right? Because you can't afford to not have Minka help out with the receivers just because of how dangerous they can be in this play action heavy scheme and the crossers, and he's going to have to try to take those out of the game plan. So it was going to fall on the linebackers and maybe one of the safeties, other than Minka, that probably would have to cover him. And frankly, like there was a little while there where it felt like Kyle Shanahan just kind of forgot that George Kittle played for him and was basically just playing left tackle.
Yeah.
Which again, he's great as a blocker, one of the best, if not the best in the league. But this guy's a real weapon after the catch, especially. Like he is very much that. Just get him the ball in space, let him run over people, run around people, like that type of tight end. And if he can't go, the other tight ends on the roster, they can do all the Shanahan type stuff that they ask him to do, but they're not going to be the threat that Kittle would be, especially against a linebacker core that, while improved, we're not expecting them to lock down, one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Like, that's just probably wasn't going to happen. So without him, the offense is still going to be fine because, again, they've done it in the past where he wasn't really super involved in the passing game, it felt like, for a couple of years, but it's still a blow to their team, especially considering now if you have two of your best players possibly not playing. That's a huge, impact, and it makes that line look even kind of worse the more you look at that they gave out for. So.
Yeah, for sure. And in case you're wondering what that injury is to Kittle, we don't know exactly. It's undisclosed right now is what ESPN has it as. The NFL does not have, or teams do not have to officially report their injuries to the NFL until their team injury report. So we will see what it's listed as and where he comes in. If he's going to be,
I would guess something lower body. If I had to guess,
it's
usually what
and him. I mean, we really don't know the extent. I would have to imagine that he's gonna try to play, but again, we don't have that much information right now. As the problem is, like going in from like week 1 to 2 or 2 to 3,
it's different.
We have more information on a player, but when they don't have to disclose anything about your injury at all throughout the summer until you get to that first initial injury report, it's very hard to tell what's going on. So kind of up in the air there. I think that if I just had to guess, just a blind guess right now, I think that there's a better chance that Kittle plays than Bosa based on the way that it looks with that contract dispute. So, we'll see what happens. But if both of them don't play, I mean, you're missing 2 of your top 5 players on your team. It's going to be a huge advantage for the Steelers, who are really healthy right now.
Yes.
Let's talk about Javon Hargrave versus the Steelers offensive line. Hargrave is listed as like the left defensive tackle. So if that's where he plays for the 49ers, he's going to be going up against James Daniels most of the time, maybe a little bit of double team action in there. Hargrave obviously would probably like to have a revenge game, but at the same time, he loves the Steelers community. It's the reason why, I don't know if you heard the recent report about him.
Browns
talking to Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb was trying to recruit him, had maybe an offer to go to the Browns. And he said he just couldn't do that because of the Steelers fan base and how much he appreciated them. So whether or not that was his main reason, I don't know why, but we're going to get some Javon Hargrave action this week. So do you think the Steelers are going to have an issue containing him? He was good last year for the Eagles.
Yeah, real quick before I get into that, there's a question
go ahead.
from Tyler. Would you rather see Darnell Washington put Bosa on the ground or see Nick Herbig get a sack? I'm going to say Nick Herbig get a sack on Purdy just because that's biased because of Wisconsin fandom. But
I think so.
Washington.
I would like to see both.
Yeah,
I'd love to see Washington do that as well. I don't think that's completely unrealistic as good as Bosa is, but man, sacks are game changing, and so I'd love to see Herbig get that sack. And boy, did he have a fun preseason? So, good question, Tyler. Thank you.
But no, with Javon, he's especially since he left Steelers, right? He's been one of the at least 10, if not 5 best pass rushing interior defensive linemen in the league. Like he is one of the best at just simply penetrating into the backfield, especially as a pass rusher. And the run defense has always been kind of hit or miss with him, and it's whatever, but he's one of the most explosive pass rushers in the position in the NFL. And that's why he got that huge contract from the 49ers. They wanted that interior presence that they haven't had since they let DeForest Buckner go to the Colts with that trade. So I think that they missed that. I think they wanted to return to that as part of their defense. And if Bosa can't go, all I'm saying is I don't know if Hargrave's going to be able to do that because I do like our interior group a lot more this year. And I know we're going to be doubling him a lot, but they better hope he can do it because if Bosa isn't there, he's probably the only guy who's going to be able to make huge impact, at least in the pass rush game. So,
yeah, and Hargrave, he can really knife in there quick still, and even in his older age, and so I mean, Steelers will have to account for him for sure. And I think if it ends up being Daniels that's primarily responsible for him, then hopefully he has a good game in pass protection. Daniels was really strong down the stretch last year for the Steelers. So we'll see what the Niners decide to do here. They're going to shuffle him around the defensive line. We have not seen him in a 49ers uniform yet for regular season games. So he might be a guy that they kind of just put it every which way and have him as a 3 tech and kind of just see if he can split in there and make something happen. All right, let's talk about the keys to success this week, Shayne. What is it going to take, other than Nick Bosa not playing, for the Steelers to come away with a win in this game?
So I'll start offensively, the things, and I have 3 things that I kind of just noted down. The first thing, you have to stay on schedule versus a tough front seven from the 49ers. And even if Bosa doesn't play, their linebacker core, especially Fred Warner, and even, I think is it Alshie here? Greenlaw is the one who's still there. Yes, I always forget those. They're both basically the same player. It's funny. Those two they're the best linebacker duo in the NFL. Now, granted, Warner's carrying that a lot, but Greenlaw is a really good player in his own right.
Yeah, he is.
There's a reason why they let Alshie go to, I think it was the Dolphins or whoever signed him, or Titans signed him, I believe it was. But the point is like that linebacker duo, and then you have the front seven that they still have even without Bosa there. It's going to be tough to consistently move the football on that team just from that alone. Now, their secondary, especially Jimmy Ward's gone now. Hufanga's a fun player, but he's not the most rangy cover player, so you can exploit him a little bit. Like, you can get some plays on their secondary, but you have to get through that front seven first and block that front seven first, and that's certainly not very easy to do. So you have to stay on schedule. You have to stay ahead of the chains, because if you don't, if you get down in that third and long situation, even if Bosa's not there, they're going to be able to find a way to get pressure. Their defensive line coach, I think it's Kursick. I can't remember how to say his last name, but he's one of the best in the NFL. He's going to find ways to get pressure no matter who's really playing. I really do believe that. It's just going to be easier if Bosa plays. Have to stay on schedule versus their front seven. That's the first thing for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, their linebackers are the best in the business in terms of like Pro Football Focus grades. Graded out as the 2nd and 9th best linebackers, respectively, between Warner and Greenlaw. And I think that those guys are going to come downhill, and they're going to make it challenging to run the football. So my goal offensively for the Steelers, the key to success, is you have to pass the ball effectively. And so I think that they should be able to create a pocket. Obviously, a lot of this depends on whether Bosa is playing or not, because we know how disruptive that guy is. But you might not be able to come in here, even with this home game and playing through the preseason, being all fired up. You might not be able to run the ball like you intend to run the football. And so if that's the case, then the Steelers are going to have to air it out to try to make something happen that way. What else do you have, Shayne, for another key?
So speaking of that, you have to be able to give your playmakers a chance down the field against a suspect secondary. The secondary, it's not – I really like Ward, their top corner. I like him a lot. Brought him over from Kansas City. I think it was last year. It was his first year with them. He's a really good number 1 corner. But outside of that, I mean, you don't have Jimmy Ward there anymore. I believe it's Deshaun Gibson now as a starting free safety possibly. Hufanga, I know he had a really good season last year, but again, he is a limited player athletically and in coverage. So you have to be able to get Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, perhaps, maybe, some shots down the field and just stress this defense and make it hard for them to just play tight and try to force pressure and force them to run the football. You really have to be able to open things up a little bit at least. And that includes, like, even if they don't always work, give them something. And this is part of the problem that we've had with Canada for the past couple of years, is make the defense think you might stretch the field and stress the defense. Like, even if you don't hit on them constantly, even if you do maybe lose a possession off of it, give them a look that they have to be prepared for, because it just opens everything else up. Like, it's just hard to run an offense when everybody kind of knows, okay, they want to do this. They're going to do this, whether we give them a look for it or not. Like, give them something to think about. And if they don't, it's not going to be a great day offensively.
Yeah, I mean, you need to test the waters down the field early and often, I think, because that's where the weakness is going to be at the cornerback position. Outside of Ward, they're very suspect there. The rest of their roster is pretty strong. And so I think that's where they're going to have to make something happen. And that's where they did, like, during the preseason. And that was kind of their bread and butter last year in the passing game, was throw it down the sideline to Pickens. So if they can make that work and they can show that they're going to have success in that area, I won't be as concerned about the run. Use the pass to set up the run, not the other way around. I think that's how teams should do it, to maximize the explosiveness of your offense. So if they can pass the football, they can definitely have success in this game. Do you have anything else for us, Shayne?
Last one, and we kind of touched on it. Bosa or not, Pickett's newfound pocket poise has to show up. Like, this is a game where he has to be able to navigate the pocket, to escape the pocket when necessary, to avoid pressure whenever he possibly can. Like, this is going to be the game where if everything we've seen from him in training camp in the preseason, again, a short stint in the preseason, but we still saw it, he has to be under control and poised inside the pocket and be able to win from the pocket. But again, do not be afraid when the play's not there. Go be Kenny Pickett. Like, he has to be able to make some of those plays that he trademarked as a senior and that we saw some last year. Like, it's going to come down to him. Like, at the end of the day, like against a team like the Niners, regardless of whether they have Bosa or not, this is a team that is a powerhouse in the NFC, that is coached by one of the best offensive minds maybe ever in the sport, and it's the reason why half the teams in the NFL run his scheme to some degree. You're going to have to be the one to go out and make a play at some point. Like, that's kind of the difference between this game. And I think one of the reasons why, I think Shanahan has gravitated towards Brock Purdy is, to a lesser degree, in my opinion, he is a playmaker type quarterback at the end of the day a little bit too. He can do things that, maybe some of his other quarterbacks that still don't have good arms and aren't the most accurate players, but he can at least extend plays and make some plays. Kenny has to be able to do that to an even higher degree than he did last year if we want to win this game.
Yeah, and Purdy is that perfect type of system quarterback that Shanahan likes. And so my other key, and this one's almost as big as the first one, Shayne, on offensive side of the ball. Defensively, I do worry about the Steelers linebackers a little bit in this game. These guys they're an aggressive group, and you can see that with Landon Roberts, how he comes downhill. You can see it during his time at Miami. But what these guys kind of always been their Achilles heel a little bit is this going to be a strong coverage group? And we've got questions about this again, even though it's entirely new linebacker room, really, outside of Mark Robinson. You've got Cole Holcomb and Quan and Landon Roberts as your top three guys. But are they going to stay disciplined enough in coverage? Because when Shanahan pulls out that PA stretch boot and everybody's getting sucked to one side, like, this is where Shanahan is so dangerous. He'll get three guys streaming at three different levels of the field, going across the middle, and there's going to be just yard to gallop after the catch if you are not disciplined. So they have to stay disciplined in their coverage responsibilities. They can't get sucked into the play action. Shanahan's the best in the business at it. And so I think that they're not used to this style of offense, really. And so this is a different animal. This is an uncommon opponent. They only play the 49ers once every 4 years, and they don't play Shanahan very often. And so they have to just make sure that everybody defensively is staying disciplined, especially those linebackers, because he's going to find a way to get matchups with Debo against a linebacker. And so I think that if these guys make a lot of big plays and big plays after the catch, it could be a long afternoon for the Steelers.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, because my first defensive key to success: don't take the bait on Shanahan's play action nonsense. You cannot allow him to get away with what he gets away with it all the time. That's why he's a head coach. It's why he's had some of the best offenses over the past decade, with his teams and with his schemes. And it's why half the league runs some variation of it. Now, granted, no one runs it the way he does exactly and as well as he does, but you cannot take the bait all the time in the play action. And I understand it's really hard, and he makes it really difficult. And that's the whole reason, again, why it's not that easy to just say that. But if they do it to the degree that could happen, especially week one, you're not your first game of the year, you're going to still be getting used to everything. We have a whole new linebacker core, like you talked about, that is aggressive and it's going to be good against most teams. Against the Niners, I don't know so much necessarily. So they can't take the bait constantly in the play action. Minkah has to be a big factor in this game as somebody who can try to take away some of the stuff that leaks out and try to stay disciplined on the back end to try to take away big plays. It's going to have to take a team effort of just everyone collectively reading their keys, trying to stay in front of guys and make sure that they're not getting guys slipping behind them on play action and everything like that. So that's definitely the number one thing. And I'm glad you touched on that. The second thing, I would say, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that the number one thing for the defense to do outside of that, to me, keep Purdy in the pocket, make him win from there. When he was at his best last year, when he was going on that run with the offense and everything was taking off, he was handing the ball off to Christian McCaffrey, and he was throwing him in his flat. He was throwing on the run to guys, on crossing routes. He was escaping the pocket, avoiding pressure. You have to keep him inside the pocket, because as a pure pocket passer, one, his accuracy was not that great last year, especially on film. Like, he'd missed a lot of throws that a lot of guys normally would make. His arm talent just isn't really up to snuff for most teams that would be looking for a starter. In this scheme, it doesn't impact him as much, but still, just if you keep him in there and make him make tough throws, you're going to get a couple that you can pick off. Especially Minkah is the type of guy that on a throw, like if he's throwing 40 yards down the field, it's going to take a while to get there. That's the type of throw Minkah can undercut and take back the other way. So I think that's really the biggest thing they can do against Purdy specifically, is try to funnel him, keep him in the pocket, even if it's like a muddle rush and whatever you got to do, keep him in there, and you're going to have success defensively there.
Yeah, and that is the difficult part about a Shanahan scheme. It's
Yes,
not
it's
that
very
Purdy's
hard
like
to.
this some amazing runner. It's like, oh, you got to
Yeah,
account for
moving
Justin
pockets,
Fields back
man.
there.
Moving
It's
pockets.
just he is such a manipulator of the defense where you'll get everybody flowing one direction, and and Purdy will roll out on this boot, and there'll be nobody within 10 yards of him. And like, where is everybody? Why are we not staying disciplined? And so the discipline is huge this week. We'll be pulling our hair out otherwise if we don't see that happen. So I think that I'm glad we both touched on that. I think that's going to be a big one. So watch for that this week. I would love for Matt Canada to adopt some of those type of
Some
plays
of the stuff. Yeah.
that Shanahan has there. It takes a very specific group, and you have to have the offensive line that can handle it, and just a bunch of guys that are great after the catch is what they have as well. And Brandon Ayuk and Debo and George Kittle. And so they definitely have the personnel for it. But it's a scheme that has been successful, and it equates to a very efficient offense. Like, you can go and look at like quarterback yards per attempt over the past year since Shanahan has got there. It doesn't matter if it's like CJ Beathard or Brock Purdy or Jimmy Garoppolo. Every one of their quarterbacks finishes near the top of the league in yards per attempt because they aid their quarterbacks so greatly by the scheme, and you make the receivers and the tight ends and the running backs do the work after the catch.
Yes.
You're just setting them up for success. And so I agree with you. I don't think it's Purdy as this some star. I think he's great for Mr. Relevant, obviously.
Oh yeah.
Sure. And he's a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he just beat out a former first round pick that they traded up 3 total first rounders to get. So it's nothing against Purdy. It's just that Shanahan's scheme works out so beautifully for quarterbacks. It's so quarterback friendly that if you can run it and you've got a head on your shoulders and you can run it effectively, then it's going to make you look good just by default. And so I think they are going to have to count for him. And like you said, keep Purdy in the pocket. Don't let him roll way out and then scan the field and for 3, 4, 5 seconds at a time and find guys just roaming free across the middle there. All right, Shayne, let's move on to our, do you have any more? For
there
us
was one thing I wanted to mention.
Go ahead.
This one is pretty straightforward. Missed tackles equals death against this offense.
Oh yeah.
You cannot, and I understand Debo is pretty much maybe the hardest person on the planet to tackle in the open field right now in the NFL. Like, he's definitely up there in the top 5. You cannot, under any circumstances, have a high missed tackle rate against this team. If you do not tackle them when they have the ball at first, they're going to score 30, 40, 50-yard touchdowns on you. Like, they're just going to. Ayuk, whether it's him, he's more of the traditional true like receiver for that team. But again, he's still going to do a lot of stuff after the catch, of course. Debo is just a weapon in general. Christian McCaffrey, I don't even want to think about him right now, honestly. He's like the last thing I want to think about for this team to deal with. But like, again, you have to be able to tackle guys. Now, obviously, part of that is being able to cover them to begin with and be close enough to them to tackle them, which we'll see how well that goes. But if you do get an opportunity in the open field to make a tackle, if you don't make it, you're probably giving up 20 more yards. Like, that's just kind of how this offense works, right? Again, it's easier said than done. If it was that easy, a lot of teams last year wouldn't have let them put up the numbers they did in the second half of the season, especially. But they have to, at least when they have opportunities to get plays in the backfield, especially, or get plays on short crossers or slants, whatever, tackle these guys. You have to wrap up. Don't worry about laying somebody out. Take out their legs, whatever you have to do. Like, if you can stop the run after catch threat of the Shanahan offense, at least to some degree, you give yourself a shot, at least, of limiting their offensive potential.
Yeah, they cannot afford to miss tackles against this team. Like you said, one of the best in the league after the catch. All the analytics show that as well. Their yards after the catch per reception and broken tackles, all that stuff. They're always near the top of the league, and it's not hard to see why with the scheme and the personnel that they have. And you look at their skill players collectively as a group. I mean, they're one of the strongest in the league. You might be going against the best running back in the league this week. So all those things. And so we're hoping to see that big improvement by having Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts out there as compared to what the Steelers had last year and those complacent linebackers that would just allow the play to come to them. Attack the play, but make sure you wrap up and tackle. All right, Shayne, we're going to give our game predictions before we sign off here. And then we will try to plan for another show this Friday, and we'll have that published out to you guys at some point after that. Steelers versus 49ers. Steelers are 2.5-point underdogs, like I said. Do you think that the game plays out that way? We'll start with your predictions first. Give us a winner and a score, Shayne.
So I do think this is a classic kind of repeat of the last 2 openers, right? Where Steelers are underdogs because they're playing one of the best teams in the AFC, or at least projected to be one of the best teams in the AFC. This time it's the NFC. But I think a similar result's coming. I really think that, especially if Bosa doesn't play, but even if he does, and even if Kittle plays, I think that these teams match up better than I think, again, the odds give them credit for, and the NFL probably in general is going to give them credit for. I really think that if Pickett can play as well as we think he's going to play based on his preseason and everything we've seen from him, they can do enough offensively to limit the defense's ability to shut them down compared to what we were doing last year. And our defense should match up pretty well overall, especially if, again, we just need to be able to tackle well. And I think week one, they're going to be amped up. They want to prove a point. We know how this team comes out in week one. I'm going to pick the Steelers 24-20. I think it's going to be a relatively low-scoring game, but a little bit above the over, honestly. Just because, again, I think that both offenses are going to have their moments. It's just going to come down to which quarterback, I think, honestly, makes the play at the end of the game. And right now I'm taking Pickett over Purdy for that.
Okay. Yeah, I can get behind that. I think this game goes one of three ways, Shayne. The Steelers win a close game, probably decided by a field goal. 49ers win a game decided by a field goal, or the Steelers win by 2 scores. I don't see a scenario. I really don't. I don't see a scenario where the Steelers get blown out in this contest or even lose by multiple scores, because the Steelers just seem so much more prepared heading into week one. They're the team that's played their starters. We know what Tomlin does in week one. And despite contrary to popular belief, Tomlin's actually really good in week one. It's sometimes not the whole month of September, but week one, he's got a really good record. And so that he's got that going for him. Where you look at the opposite way, Kyle Shanahan was not good to start off the season. He finished the season really strong last year. And so I think that's just kind of part of his philosophy. He doesn't want to risk injuries. And so he doesn't play his players as much during the preseason. You've got that going for the Steelers. The major possibility of not having a player as good as Nick Bosa playing in this contest could definitely favor them. And not knowing some of these factors for sure, Shayne, I've got the Steelers winning a 20-17 game. So I'm just under the point total, that 41 points. You're just over that, but I would bet the money line for the Steelers. And in fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to bet the money line for the Steelers this week. I think that it's not a safe bet when you're playing a team as good as the 49ers, but I think it's one that's worth taking. The Steelers are plus 120 on the money line. So you win your money back in a little bit, then some, double that. So it's one of those things where I just think that the arrow's pointing up for the Steelers right now, and it's pointing kind of diagonally down for the 49ers with what they've been having to deal with and kind of the distractions away from football right now. Jeremiah chimes in with 31-17 Steelers. Good. And we'd love to hear all your predictions.
That'd be fun.
We're going to wrap up the show today, but you can leave a comment in the video. Go check out the Ike Taylor video that I had with Ike yesterday if you've not had a chance to do that. And please subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. The more subscribers we have, the more content we can bring you here this season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So thank you for joining us today on the show. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Still Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Still Curtain podcast. And thanks for listening to the Still Curtain podcast.